Hi everyone, this is Tony Holbein. You are listening to The Revenue Formula with Mikkel and Tony. In today's episode, we share 3 hidden signs that you have a weak go-to-market. Enjoy. Before we jump into the show, today's episode is brought to you by Everstage, the top-rated sales commissions platform on G2, Gartner Peer Insights, and Trustradius, with more than 2,000 reviews from customers like Diligent, Wiley, Trimble, and more. Visit everstage.com and mention Revenue Formula to unlock a personalized sales compensation strategy session with one of Everstage's RevOps experts. And now, enjoy the show.
So we had a fun week last week. Basically, everyone was completely sick, as in crazy sick.
Well, this time I wasn't sick. It's all on this side.
And it's amazing. Yeah. And the funny thing is, you and I, we're going to meet up tomorrow, and probably then you're going to get sick. You know, I'm going to transport something home.
I'm going to put like a mask onto
yeah.
it. But besides all of this sickness thing, you told me, and you didn't tell me actually why. So this is the first time I'm hearing it. You told me you had a little bit of an adventure last night.
Oh, yeah. So to top it off, like I just said, the kids have been sick for like a week, even my wife. And then yesterday, you know, everyone pretty much almost except one ready to get back at it, right? 4 out of 5 ready to get back to work and school and daycare and blah. And then my son, he's like, I got something in my eye. It's like, it hurts. And I was like, okay, can I see? And I couldn't see anything. And then, you know, he just rubs his eye. Everything is good. He's quiet. We're chilling. 20 minutes later, all of a sudden, his eye has just swollen like he can't open his eye swollen level. Like someone seriously punched him in the face. And I was just like, what happened? And I had to go and wake up mom who was napping, and we kind of look at this thing and you guys as parents, like, I'm not a doctor. I don't know what brought this on. Was it because he rubbed his eye or was something in it? And it's just like, you know what? We probably need to call someone now and figure out what the heck is going on. They're like, yeah, you probably just want to go to the ER just to be safe. So come by.
What's really important to know for all the US folks listening, an ER visit in Denmark, it's not really the ER, by the way, but it also doesn't cost you $20,000. So it's like, as a parent, you more or less, you know, it's like you don't wanna. It's like really, it's like, do I
have to? Yeah.
But you know, it's not. Otherwise, it's actually not.
Well, you play through this thing. Well, we don't go there. Kid gets blind. I'm gonna hear about this for the rest of my life.
Yeah,
we're going there.
Yes.
So that's what I was up to. That was a fun little excursion.
And it turns out it was just
and everything was fine.
It was just some. Like what is it, like an allergic reaction or what?
You know what? That's what I love about doctors. They're like, so he doesn't have anything in his eye. It doesn't look like an allergic reaction or an infection. I mean, we're okay sending him home if you're okay. So it's like, wait, what? It's up to me now? Or so you know, it's like inconclusive, I would say. Inconclusive.
Same story, a little bit different though. One of my sons, you know, he's jumping around, blah, blah, blah. Suddenly he's limping. It's like, and he says, ow, my foot hurts. And we're like, okay, yeah, come on. You know, sleep on it. And then if it's still the next morning, then, you know, and it's still the next morning. So what do we do? We're like, okay, I think he needs to get an x-ray now. Kind of, it's just our responsibility now, right? He has to get an x-ray. So kind of drive him in, he gets an x-ray. The doctors are like, yeah, we kind of see something there, but, you know, we can't really put a cast there, so just go home.
Yeah.
And that's just now. And what should we do? Like, maybe he doesn't jump that much anymore for a while, and maybe you give him some painkillers for a while. It's like, okay, cool. Thanks for the solution. And then, you know. But the thing is, like, especially with those small kids, like, there is no solution, right? And these doctors just send you back home.
No, exactly. Fortunately, when it comes to go-to-market, you and I have plenty of solutions. And the last solution we gave, by the way, the go-to-market engineer, it kind of blew up on LinkedIn. What happened there? It was crazy.
People were a little bit upsetty about this. But it's, you know, folks, it's all okay. I think we looked it up. They're around like 207. Go-to-market engineers. And I think, you know, 40 of them is basically SDRs for Clay or something like that.
No, but you know what I also thought about? I thought about academics. It's like, if every researcher if they just all agreed on everything, would we as humanity actually progress, or would we just kind of stop there? They're done. Everything is good now.
I gotta say though, I understand the RevOps anxiety around this, because on the one hand side, they're kind of trying to grow into a direction where it's really difficult to do that. And I still think that's the role to totally do it. But at the same time, while, the function is struggling to grow in this direction, there's now also pressure from below already. That's uncomfortable. You don't want to be like that. So I understand the reaction. But since we are now Dr. Mikkel and Tony and helping you with the go-to-market, what is we going to chat about today, Mikkel?
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of anxiety, we're going to talk about 3 signs that you basically have a weak go-to-market.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like some of these things, thinking back just on career progression and places I've worked, it's like you just notice certain things as soon as you hand in your resignation, or, you get fired, alternatively. But as soon as you're like, I'm done with this place, you start noticing certain things that you didn't really notice before. And it's obviously 2020 hindsight. And I think you and I just talked through some of the things we've seen, at least. And we're like, yeah, we probably should do ourselves a favor and just recording this and trying to share what are some of the things that can be pretty devastating, or at least hold back performance for a go-to-market team. So we have 3 areas we're going to look into. And I think the most common area, and probably also the most, I want to say, visible, is the one you kind of mentioned, which is the whole morale of the team.
The morale of the team. So, shocker, we're not starting with some AI solution to something. Good old-fashioned, right? I think... Yeah. And I've seen this, I joined a company as the CRO, and this was the first thing almost that just, was so super obvious to me going into the organization. Because I think you're right. I think that there's a moment of clarity once you leave an organization, and there's a moment of clarity when you join an organization. And, everything in between is like, you're somewhere in between basically a fanboy and an addict. Like it's somewhere in between there, right?
Yeah.
And especially when you're a leader, you will have to sing the company's song, right? I mean, that's your responsibility, right? And now the funny thing is, this is kind of yourself cheating, basically happens, because so what people have found out, if you say something out loud, even though you don't believe in it or you disagree with a statement, you are now more likely to actually kind of agree with it. That's an actual thing that happens. Kind of, they found this out in, I think, prisoner of war camps in Asia, somewhere, Vietnam War or something like that. They were like experiments like this conducted where people then needed to read out loud that they support the Communist Party, American POWs basically. And because they were reading this out loud to their friends, and everyone knew they were being forced to do it, they were now believing it a little bit more. So why I'm saying that, leaders do, kind of do the same stuff, right? There's, company isn't really going so well, but let's do rah-rah and kind of tell everyone that everything is going well, right?
Yeah.
And that leads to this, you're kind of cheating yourself, right? And the next step then becomes, well, let's set, ambitious targets. Let's just kind of set something that we can all get excited about if we were to achieve it. Or let's, create, situations where maybe we don't have enough resources to get it. We just need to go and get it, and let's go, guys, right? We can figure this out. The flip side of this whole thing, though, is, and this happens again and again and again, it's like while you're trying to sing the company song and while you're kind of, beautifying everything up, you're actually creating kind of a bad morale issue on the back end of that. And that's, due to a couple of reasons. One very simple one, setting stretch goals for sales, for the company, for individuals, them not achieving it, lots of frowny faces on the sales floor, right?
Yeah.
And frowny faces on the sales floor usually translates to frowny faces everywhere else. And the thing is here, which is so stupid, your company can be growing extremely fast. Everything is going extremely well. The CEO, the CFO, everyone can be yelling from, the rooftops that everything is great, maybe because it is, by the way. But still, the feeling and the morale in the company will be one of losing, not making it, comparatively being weaker than maybe your competitors and so forth, for silly reasons of simply not getting to, hitting the target, achieving what you thought you're going to achieve.
Yeah.
And those things, I call it kind of the vicious cycle, right? Because then, once everyone is, losing belief in achieving something, then actually in order for that to go back, you need to go even further down in your target setting, which might not work out, in order to create new confidence in order to push it up again. And like once you're stuck in this bad morale issue, it's usually not just one team, it's usually across the go-to-market. Yeah. Getting out of that, really difficult.
I think it's also, targets is such a difficult one because it also acts as a magnet, right? If you set it too low, it's bullshit. People will relax too much. You will not, reap the full potential of your organization, and vice versa. If you set it too high, people are going to go like, what are they smoking up there in that boardroom? It's like, no way that's going to happen, right? So it is such a tricky exercise to navigate. But what I always found kind of weird is I've never experienced that the targets get changed.
Yeah.
Right? It's, you set targets for a full year and new facts will present themselves throughout the year. Why not use that to adjust, right? I think there could be something around you maybe not just announcing the full targets for the year, but doing it quarterly instead, and kind of taking that approach, giving you some flexibility from a leadership perspective. But I agree, it's one of the most obvious ones. You're unable to basically set effective targets, and it's like a whiplash effect on the entire team that transpires.
And the issue is, it's, the difficulty with targets is they kind of need to align. You can't tell the organization that they only need to grow 1 million, and you can, and tell the board 10 million.
Yeah.
What most people are doing is they're telling the board we need to grow 10 million, and then they're telling the organization we need to grow 15 million. Right? Kind of that's the misalignment you're allowed to do, but not the other way around. Right? Yeah. So targets are not allowed to be just motivational, but in many cases they are. And the thing is really, it's like you can smell it when you walk on the sales floor and the morale is down. And people don't believe that they can hit their targets, and then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Kind of getting out of that is, you almost need to fire your way out of this. Actually, kind of, especially when you're in a new CRO, new VP of sales, walking into a team like this, you have two options, right? One is to lower targets and pick the fight with the CFO, because that will be your adversary to be like, hey, dude, we can't, then the business doesn't make sense if those are the targets. Or the other one is you fire all the non-believers and kind of load up new people, kind of erase the collective memory of the bad morale, right? Those are your only two options, and both of them are really terrible. Terrible.
And kind of expensive also. It's not cheap to just replace folks.
But I'm just telling, kind of, once you have that smelly feeling, then that's probably a really good sign that something in your go-to-market is off.
Yeah. And I think the other one as well is in that whole morale realm, besides just the numerical targets. And by the way, lots have been written about how to navigate this. It's just to say, if there's some pain around targets, that's definitely leading to morale issues, right? The other is the leadership, right? They can also heavily lead to morale issues, not necessarily around targets, but it can be the decision-making process. It can be how they communicate or lack thereof. It can be all kinds of things. Do you have any kind of great examples of, your own leadership causing low morale? No, I'm kidding.
So one that I'm really have been terrible at. Maybe I'm not sure if I'm becoming better at this. I'm not quite sure about this, but low comms, insufficient communication. And that's such an obvious one that happens all the time, because it's when you're 10 people, 20 people, you don't need to communicate and re-communicate.
Yeah.
But once you're 100 people, you need to over-communicate.
Yeah.
And getting that jump right, really difficult to do. And what then happens on the backside of that is all the stuff that isn't being understood correctly or isn't being understood at all because it hasn't been, explained. What people are doing is they're filling in the worst possible, puzzle piece that connects those two storylines, and that then kind of leads to negative morale, right? And then you have like, we're doomed as a company, or hey, these leaders, incapable and insufficient to kind of lead this company, yada yada yada. And then from there, it's really difficult. I'm not sure whom you need to fire, but like really difficult to get out of that thing.
It's also, the thing about communication, and why I kind of hate it a little bit, it's you need to repeat that message like to the point where you're sitting at lunch and you almost want to throw up repeating that same message just for retention for the team to kind of know what the priorities are or why we're doing something, right?
My rule of thumb is once people start complaining about this being repetitive, then you started scratching the surface. Then you still need to go further than that.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, right, kind of all of this is connected to bad morale. It could also be hiring the wrong people, firing the wrong people, like doing all of the things that lead other people around the organization to lose faith in the leadership team, basically.
Yeah. So That's 1 point of a week go to market. Boy, we started with a soft one, so let's go for another one, which is actually a way to not blame the go to market. It's the pace of shipping. We're going outside of go to market.
Yeah.
Why are we talking about this? Well, I can speak from a marketing standpoint. One of the best tools you have and the best things that can happen throughout a year is actually great commercial releases. What I mean by commercial releases, well, it is basically a new solution, not just a small feature that completes potentially a new use case, will unlock more budget with existing or new customers, right? Read, you can get more revenue out of it, and it will kind of create some attention on your company in a good way. And you want to make sure to have those one kind of hero, or you have anti-heroes, but it's like, hey, I don't ever want to become that type of person. Then you have heroes like, I want to emulate that pattern. For me on shipping, it was actually Drift back in the day. Now Salesloft, I believe they're under. They had a great cadence of shipping quarterly and making a big splash around something every quarter. So it looked like they had immense momentum as a company. Yeah. It's just a great way to retain kind of that top of mind share. And I think, that was a key way for them to actually attract more revenue.
So, and I think kind of on the one hand side, you can kind of see it as a ammunition for marketing releases. If someone isn't shipping fast enough, then suddenly you're running out of ammunition, right? Kind of this is the point you're making. I think even broader, it's taking care of bugs, very simple stuff, right? Kind of there's so many frustrations in your product, and as they come up, guess what? They will alienate users and eventually to churn. It's just inevitable, right? Yeah. Ability to not release bugs with new feature releases and the ability to take care of them. That for me is sometimes a very good sign of strong go-to-market and basically kind of shipping kind of that sits behind that, because you basically make it extremely easy for the go-to-market teams to be successful, right? Kind of that's what we're talking about. I think it was the founder of Gong who was being asked, how do you build $1 billion business? And he said, very easy. You just need to do two things. One thing is build a great product that doesn't need a sales team. And as a next step, build such a great sales team that doesn't need a good product. Right? But at the end of the day, we know where the reality is, and kind of having a great product obviously helps you with all of that stuff, right? And again, this is major feature releases. For me, this is taking care of bugs and stuff, and it's doing smaller things. So actually what I've seen great, product teams are doing, and then also kind of being able to ship this thing fast, is to squeeze in things that weren't debated back and forth 1,000 times, and then, decided between CRO and CPO and CMO and whatever, and then now we're building this thing. But a team that is also able to, ship small tweaks, like, hey, this button was misplaced. We need to put it somewhere else. People didn't see it, or whatever it might be, right? And getting this into a cadence and getting this out and providing this momentum, this positive pressure to the go-to-market team, making the go-to-market team maybe feel like, oh, wait a minute, these guys are doing a really fantastic job. We're kind of the weak ones. Yeah. I know that level of self-reflection rarely happens on the go-to-market side, but those are great signs of your product team doing a fantastic job. And then, obviously this leads to a strong go-to-market afterwards.
And I think there's a couple of things also, by the way, to unpack here. Notice we're not discussing quality, right? This is not an excuse to lower the bar. By no means. Like, you can't ship something that doesn't work, right? It's just not going to work out in the end, right? So it's not a substitute for you to lowering the bar on quality. I think the other struggle that will happen, and will kind of also show that there is a weak go-to-market motion, because this directly impacts your go-to-market, is you set out with a plan to release something, but along the way, you discover that that's actually really difficult to accomplish, or there's lack of alignment, or you didn't have a good enough process, or excuse. We need to now actually strip away functionality in order to meet the deadline. Terrible outcome for everyone involved. Because what used to happen here is, well, now we ship the campaign, go to market, go sell it. And marketing is usually the first one to go, well, excuse me, but this was supposed to support a customer service use case, but now there's no ticketing system, so it's just not gonna work. then it hits sales, and they're pitching the thing, and the prospects go, well, so where do all the tickets go? And it's like, into the void. We don't have a ticketing service. So sorry, it's going to, so it's also, I think that kind of focus, and it's almost also tied to the whole, if you have a strong pace of shipping, it also allows you to focus, quite frankly, to say, well, we ship this thing. Now we're getting feedback from folks. Let's actually implement that and ship that as well, right? And I think it's just, for me, that's at least been a tricky one. And I think if you're unsure, hey, do we have a high pace or do we not? I think a good reference point is that there's at least a large key release happening once a quarter where the commercial teams are going, this is going to be awesome.
I think another indicator is how quickly can they react to things that are maybe being brought up by the sales team or happening in the market. So the sales team piece is pretty straightforward. Something happens on a customer call, it's being flagged, and then someone is building it, right? Yeah. The other thing is obviously the whole, and currently it's the AI shift. So what are we doing in order to address that? And then actually being able to react to these things, right? I think that connection is also pretty interesting. And we can always try and shift the blame around, because ultimately you could also say that one of the reasons why it maybe takes this team to ship, it takes the team so long to ship something is maybe there's a strategic fit that's not working out. Maybe you guys are not focusing enough, right? Maybe that's the reason for half-ass product being pushed to go to market and then go sell it now, right? I mean, we've all been there, but really this dysfunction that is usually driving tons of frustrations and then also mediocre results on the commercial side.
Yeah. I think maybe also just to wrap it up, why it matters. I hope everyone already knows, but there's this amazing scene in The Bear, basically the guy who wants to start a Michelin restaurant. And you see his backstory where he's in the kitchen prepping produce, and I think he's like taking peas out of the shell. And there's a guy standing next to him, and he's just like picked thousands and thousands of peas, and the other guy only done half. And he's looking over like, what? He's like super fast. What is going on? And just imagine a competitive scenario, being able to outship the competition. That's something, you can take to the bank eventually. Yeah. That's something you take to the bank. So the last piece, and actually I would say also closely related to product, is, are you even listening to the customers? Yeah. Truly. And I think there's lots of mechanisms out there that make us think, yeah, we totally are customer driven as a company, but it's lies. It's lies, all of it. So what do I mean? It's gone calls. You're recording calls so you can listen to them. But honestly, how many people are listening to those calls, and how frequently are they? And are you able to use it for anything other than maybe sales coaching? Are you able to use it for decision making in any part of your go-to-market? I think it becomes more of it builds a perception of what matters, almost like osmosis, right? It's like, oh, okay, I've heard now 2 gone calls. They said this thing. So that's, they probably care about that. That's now the truth, right? But I don't think we've succeeded in, for a lot of companies, instrumenting a solid process to work with customers.
No, I think, we want to be customer driven, customer centric, there's always someone with a customer hat on that, has a seat at the board, at the table. And there's so many ways of saying these things, but really when you dig into most organizations, it's first of all, it's very difficult to define what that is, right? Yeah, and, I totally get it. But the next step is, do you really actually believe that you're customer driven, right? Kind of, is that really kind of the thing? And for me, usually this comes down to, how much time is your collective organization spending on actually proactively listening to your customers, right? That's the first step. And don't get me wrong, selling something is not listening to your customers. This is you're listening in order to react, right? You're not listening in order to take in, understand, process, and then maybe kind of do. This is not what this is about. I think if there's anything closest to listening, it's probably your support and CS teams, I would say, even though they have similar objectives actually, right? And when you really think about, okay, there's like tons of people, having customer conversations and listening to them, how's that intel actually being taken into the organization, right? And what I see a lot, and it's, my own fault as well, you always are being a little bit dominated by the next big deal or the next big opportunity, basically, that is driving some of the, hey, we're listening to that one customer really well, And then the other thing is, and this is just scientifically proven to be a poor approach, but every human being basically does it. It's you kind of come to a conclusion of what you want to do, and then you're looking for material that's supporting it.
Yeah. Confirmation bias. Love it.
Right? And then you go around and kind of ask her, don't they ask you about this all the time? Isn't that actually the problem? Right?
Yeah.
And obviously the rep, talking to maybe a boss or superior or something like this, and also the rep don't have perfect recollection of all the conversations, recency bias, and hey, they want to close. And I think what we've seen is, getting around this, actually listening to the customer. It's difficult, and people don't end up doing it. And if they don't end up doing it, I think this very much leads to kind of poor product being built, probably low shipping, kind of low commercial results and stuff. But I think when you walk into an organization and you don't have the founder or the founding team anymore that is really deep down into the product and really kind of understands and really cares, and there's no one else doing this anymore, I think that's a sign of a potentially soon to be, weak go-to-market. Maybe this is a leading indicator actually more than it's a sign of you have a weak go-to-market. But if you don't have, a handful of people that really understand all of that stuff and really bring it together and keep it up to date, I think that's what's going to eventually result in a poor go-to-market.
I also just want to say, imagine for a second that you had no quantitative data anymore. It was just no longer available. It was gone. Boop. Don't have it. Can't use it for any decision making. I think in that scenario, everyone go like, yeah, that's just clearly not going to work out, is it? It's the same thing with qualitative data. It's the exact same thing when you talk with a customer, run an interview and do stuff like that. And I think the tricky thing is, as a company grows, you get less and less access to customers because more people want to have access, right? So think about it. You're going to train them on a new feature. You're going to run renewals and upsells and expansion. You're going to have recurring customer service conversation. You're going to announce new features. And then you're going to do CSAT surveys and NPS surveys. And oh, by the way, marketing, can we do an interview with this client for an hour for a case study or like for understanding? No, forget about it. There's going to be so many reasons not to do it. And I can just say, having done it at least a couple of times with just the deals that were closed won, to understand, hey, what was the experience actually like? Why did you go for our solution? And did you consider any competitive alternatives? And what were some of your objections? Like, what would have kept you? What was really close to keeping you from buying? I'm just telling you, that kind of stuff. This is where you end up with a stellar positioning. You end up with a awesome sales pitch because you already know what the objections are going to be, so you can handle them. And the sad truth is, if you just go and talk with one sales rep, two sales reps, like to your point, they're going to be, okay, I just lost this deal yesterday. If I had this, this deck about pharmaceutical production companies in Middle East specialized in this thing, then I would totally have closed the deal.
And I think it's like the angle here is actually really interesting, right? Because it's listening to customers doesn't only mean building the right product. It also means selling it to them in the right way, marketing it to them in the right way, right? Kind of those are also things that you want to pick up and understand, right? And I think doing these closed won, closed lost interviews, trying to understand what was it actually that kept you from, going for this versus for something else. Yeah. Really insightful. I mean, on the one hand side, it kind of gives you some of the objections or the detractor reasons, right? That you want to tackle on your website in the FAQs, for example, right? But it also kind of gives you an understanding of, what were the almost reasons someone didn't go for you, right? And then that usually gives you an indication for a company that is slightly different, or we don't have a complete believer sitting there on the other side. That would have probably been a deal killer at that point, right? Kind of really that kind of learning. That also means listening to customers, at least from how we're seeing it.
Here's the thing also, like what I'm trying to say is love quantitative data. We've obviously used it heavily, total believer. It just can't tell you everything, right? It can tell you, here's your win rate, it sucks, but why does it suck? Like why? And the thing is, actually talking with customers, or those who didn't even make it to become a customer, it will help you understand that things data can't, quantitative data can't tell you, which is preference, motivation for buying. Like, why did they prefer this over that? Like, why are they looking for this use case and not that use case? Was it price that moved them to buy or something else? And I think a great example of this, and someone who's mastered it, is Richard Branson. He basically, I don't know if this is true or not, but it's just a great example anyway. Starting Virgin Airlines, they did a survey of the market to figure out why, what are the factors, around choosing who to fly with. And it's obviously, well, do they fly to the destination? What is the cost? Is it direct? Stuff like this. They couldn't compete on any of that. But no one was competing on the experience. So they installed crazy lights on the flight, right? I think they were one of the few who started with real cutlery, not just the plastic stuff, and part of that experience instead. And so it will just tell you things that you won't get from the quantitative data. And I think if you're not actually doing that as part of your go-to-market, if you don't have a weak go-to-market today, you will certainly end up having one.
One other example that I recently stumbled into was like $100 million company, so an ARR operating on 5 or 6 different markets, like fairly standard thing. Sales reps were speaking 5 or 6 different languages, like obviously we're in Europe, there you go. And on the quantitative side, they were like, well, 10% conversion rate, 15% conversion rate. Okay, well, my thing was like, well, you need to go and, segment this out, inbound, outbound, maybe this is different, blah, blah, blah. Kind of, I think all the things we've been talking about for a really long time. And yeah, we did that. And it's like, it's still the same thing. Kind of, we don't, and it's like, well, maybe there's different competitors. And it's you know what the real answer actually is? Listen to what they're saying. What is happening on those calls? Like that is the level of insight you have to go to in order to really break the log jam of trying to figure this conversion rate thing out, right? It's like, well, but they're both following Matic and Spice and what have you. It's like, but what are they saying on those calls? Like at the end of the day, that's really the question, right? And I think if you aren't doing it, if you don't have a discipline around that, I think it's going to make it difficult for you to have a strong go-to-market, actually. Yeah. So therefore, the inverse is true. If you don't listen to your customer both on what they're being sold, meaning the product, and how they're being sold to, then you're probably going to end up having a shitty go-to-market behind it.
That's it. So hopefully, and I think probably this is a completely irrelevant episode, by the way, because obviously all our listeners, they're awesome. It's not like all the other go-to-market software startup podcasts. It's like, obviously these guys and girls, they get it. So there's no problems. Hopefully.
So Mikkel, I need to correct you. It's actually only the ones that have hit the subscribe button already. Only those ones are the ones that know things. Everyone else in between, on their way. They're missing on their stuff.
way. And by the way, we would love to get some, we would love to listen to our customers, which is you, dear listener. So if you have any feedback for this show, hit us up on LinkedIn. Drop us some, hey, here's like, really hate it when you do this thing, or would love to hear more about blank. Reach out to us. It always is super cool to know who's listening, what you folks care about, so we can create some better content.
Boom. Thank you everyone for listening. Thanks, Mikkel, for today, and have a good one. Bye-bye, folks.
Bye.